Hello everyone, my name is Tricky, and today I have the pleasure to tell you a bit about the upcoming lane-based CCG, Architects of Fate. Already well under development, Architects of Fate leans heavily on the lore of established myth and legend and blends it into a compelling game system. This evening I have the opportunity to tell you about the game, how it's played, how it's won, and how you'll put together your very first deck. Further, I've also been sent 3 preview cards to share for an exclusive first look into the mechanics on offer in Architects of Fate. Players start their deck building process by choosing 5 paragons, characters that you will instantly recognise from the stories. These paragons define your play patterns, as you can only play cards in a given lane if they match the colour of a paragon already present there on your side. As you and your opponent play cards back and forth, your aim is to conquer 2 opposing towers, with defeating the same tower twice being a valid win condition also. I think it's the actual deck building process is where Architects of Fate is going to stand out, however. Each of the paragons, 5 of which will start with your deck, have their own unique and diverse card pool, from which you need to select 8 to pair with each paragon. Do this 5 times and you've got yourself a 40 card deck. Now, I know what you're thinking, this seems a little bit restrictive, and I think at the beginning of the game's lifetime it might feel that way when paragons only have a relatively small or niche card pool to pair with them from the get-go. Obviously, or at least hope, that those card pools would get deeper and deeper and more synergies would appear as development goes on and as the game increases in its own lifespan. But the idea that I really like behind this is the implicit nudge that it gives players to deck build and to find their own synergies without being overwhelmed from the get-go. I can easily see a situation where you decide, hey, I want to play Paragon A, and you go in and you just throw in all of their cards because, well, why wouldn't you? And then you get to Paragon B, and you're like, well, lash them in, play out that, and by the time you get to Paragon C, D, and E, you probably don't have very much space left in your 40 card deck. If it was a case you're going to be throwing in a whole bunch of cards that were available for each of them, the fact that there is a smaller but more defined and curated card pool for each paragon as part of their supporting cards means that the devs have set identities for each one that will be adhered to. For example, if Paragon A is a particularly low to the ground, low cost curve aggro deck, there's not going to be value tools within their card pool. This is an opportunity for devs to point players towards, hey, Paragon C actually has some really good value tools, those tools that allow you to get a bit over the edge. And when you're designing your team of 5 paragons, you'll be keeping that in mind. Hey, I want to dip into this region or this paragon or this color, whatever you want to call it, to get access to these tools, but also being conscious of I need these tools, and this is what overall I want my deck to do. So I think that's going to be really cool. There's different systems, as you can see here, for card rarities, common cards which you play up to 3 of in deck, and also epic rarity cards which you can have a maximum of 2 copies in the deck. Now, what's interesting to me about this is that the devs have already copped and acknowledged that epic rarity cards need to be limited because they are going to have substantial game impacting effects, and this is exciting to see. Too often you have cards, especially in card games that assign different rarities cards, where rare or short printed or whatever types of cards, they really don't do very much, or sometimes they're just a bit pushed. This seems to imply to me that these cards are limited because they actually have something exciting going on, something that could help you steal back some tempo or do something exciting, and that's the reason why they're limited beyond just, hey, card good. So that's probably the overview of what the game is, how it's played, and how you're going to actually put together your deck. And I'm happy to say now that I do have 3 separate images to share of a paragon or something along those lines. I've been told very vaguely what's coming up next. So let's take a look together. This is Odin, a 6 attack and 12 health, I would presume, unit, with two abilities here. Firstly is a passive ability called Warrior's Heaven. When an allied follower with 6 or more power dies in this lane, add that unit to Valhalla. And then an active ability with a cooldown of 8 called Open the Gates. Fill the empty slots in all lanes with units from Valhalla. Now this seems pretty exciting because, you know, as anyone who's played CCGs or TCGs, whatever you want to call it, knows, suddenly being able to come back from the brink, and it's exciting. It leads these fun play patterns where the opponent is trying to, especially playing against Odin, is realizing, hey, I've got to finish them off quickly because units are being added to this card pool of the grave, or Valhalla in this case, incrementally, and if I don't finish them off, they're going to finish me off once they steal back that tempo. And I think this is a really cool concept because firstly, you're not just admitting anything to Valhalla. No, it's got to be something that's strong, something that, you know, lived a good life. And that fits so nicely in with the lore of Valhalla and of Norse mythology in the first place. It's a resting place for warriors who died in battle, worthy individuals. So the fact that there is this requirement of having 6 or more power to gain entry to Valhalla, I like that quite a lot. As far as how fair and balanced it'll be, look, with just this card to go by, it's hard to say. I do feel as though this is going to lead to some very swingy moments where players feel as though they just need that little extra turn, and then suddenly the gates close on one side and they open on the other, and suddenly everything's flipped around on its head. But also there's probably going to be some really interesting opportunities for counterplay in this. So let's say a 6 cost unit or 6 power unit is about to die. I'm sure the opponent will have an opportunity to interact there and say, you know what, actually I'm going to find a way to reduce its power, or to make sure that it dies at something that isn't 6 or more in any way, or maybe it doesn't die at all, to prevent it from getting entry and prevent it from coming back on that big blowout turn later on. Yeah, so this could be interesting. I'd be really curious to see what other cards would fit in with Odin and how they're going to do that. Luckily for us, we do have 2 more. So firstly, we have this spell, Eyes and Ears. Select a caster. So it's a 4-cost card, by the way. Select a caster. Summon a raven to the first position in the other 2 lanes. So in this particular case, I believe a caster will be either a paragon that exists in a particular lane, or it might be a unit. That's something that I'm not entirely sure of. I think it's a paragon, but I'm sure we'll find out. So what this card does is summons a raven to the first position in the other 2 lanes. So yeah, it doesn't give an immediate buff to that lane, however it does to the others. Now, without knowing what a raven is, this isn't particularly helpful. Fortunately, would you believe, the final card, it is a raven. I was worried there for a second. Raven, Warrior's Heaven is the name of its passive ability. When I see an allied follower with 6 or more power die, send that unit to Valhalla. So this sounds very reminiscent of Odin's passive ability. However, Odin won't always be on the board, and that's something to bear in mind. That another aspect of counterplay is, hey, if Odin's not around to see someone get in, they're not getting in, which means they're not coming back on that big turn later on. At least that's how I think this is going. So by putting these ravens out, they are the eyes and ears. They are the eyes and ears of Odin. I think thematically this has been put together really well. I'm actually really excited to see what sort of mindset has gone into the other cards, because these have been done very cleanly. Even in this small 3-card set, I can see exactly what the developers have been trying to do. Now, the Raven itself is a 2/5 unit, 2 power, 5 health, and again, that's something that makes sense for a unit that wants to scout, wants to be the eyes. You know, this thing isn't going to be going into battle very much. That's not what it's there for. It's there to hang around and to see these larger, more powerful, combat-oriented units going into combat, so that it can send that unit to Valhalla, so that later on, when you have your Odin and you can use its active ability, with that big cooldown, admittedly, you have a larger pool of units to pull back and have that big blowout turn. So, I suppose, without seeing the other cards, it stands to reason that the Odin card pool is going to have quite a few 6+ power units. Now, from my own experience of card games, big hefty units come at a cost. So immediately this is sparking ideas in my head of, hey, what other paragons am I going to be pairing this with? Probably I want some stall tools to help me get to that later game. I probably want some tools that maybe allow equivalent exchange of trading one of my units for one of the opponents. Of course, I have that implicit upside of sending a unit to Valhalla later. Or maybe I just want a package that allows me to have a lower curve of units, maybe lower costs, high power, low health to compensate. But that will be revealed, I'm sure, as we see more cards. I'm really excited. I think this could be a really nice piece of kit, and I'm really, really excited to see how it pairs with the rest of the game. So that's everything from me. I hope you enjoyed this preview.